I froze outside the dining room door, my heart pounding as my family's laughter spilled through the crack. Calandra will cover everything, just like always. That was my mother's voice. Then Morgan, my younger sister, added with a smirk. That's what big sisters are for. My name is Calandra Whitmore, and in that moment, every scar from my past ripped open. The scholarship I lost so she could start her boutique. The birthdays where my gifts were handed to her. The endless sacrifices no one ever remembered. Now they were planning to merge my wedding with her anniversary and stick me with a $63,000 bill. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The hallway smelled faintly of roast chicken and lemon polish, the familiar perfume of my parents' Charleston home. I had come back earlier than expected, hoping to surprise them with the news that I'd finally chosen my wedding dress. Instead, I stopped dead at the sound of voices rising from the dining room. My father's voice carried first, smooth and decisive. It's practical this way, saves money, brings the family together. Everyone will see how united we are. Then came Morgan, my younger sister, her laughter sharp enough to slice through me. And of course, Calandra will cover the costs. That's what big sisters are for. Their amusement rolled out of the crack in the door like smoke, seeping into me, choking me. The bridal magazine in my hand slipped from my grip, fluttered once, then landed on the polished hardwood without a sound. My breath caught as though I'd been punched. Memories I thought I had buried clawed their way back up. Birthdays when my presents were handed to Morgan because she deserved more attention. The scholarship I had lost when my parents insisted I help fund her boutique instead. Every moment I'd been pushed aside. Every time my worth had been tied to how much I could sacrifice. The sting was so familiar, it almost felt rehearsed. I pressed my back against the wall, willing myself not to make a noise, not to let them know I was there, eavesdropping on the truth of what they really thought of me. My wedding, the day I had dreamed of since I was a girl, wasn't mine at all. To them, it was just a convenient backdrop, a stage for Morgan's anniversary. The betrayal sank deep, heavy and cold. And in that instant, one truth crystallized inside me. My family wasn't planning a wedding for me. They were planning another celebration for Morgan, and I was nothing more than the name on the check. That night, I sat by the window of my small apartment, city lights blurring against the glass. My mind drifted back to the years I tried to forget. I had once held a full scholarship to a prestigious university, a future that felt like mine alone. But when Morgan decided she wanted to launch a boutique, my parents insisted I redirect that support, claiming it was an investment in her future. I could still see myself stuffing clothes into boxes, tears stinging my eyes as I left my dorm room behind. And just as sharply, I could see Morgan twirling in a new designer dress at her store's grand opening, grinning for photos while I stood in the shadows. That memory never stopped aching. Now, in the quiet of my apartment, I whispered a vow to myself. Never again. The phone buzzed. Robert's name lit the screen. His voice was warm, asking how planning was going. I couldn't bring myself to tell him everything. Not yet. But as I scrolled through his recent messages, I caught one detail that made my chest tighten. My parents had already told him I only wanted a small, low, simple wedding, and didn't need their financial help. They were scripting a story for me, one I never agreed to, and setting me up so I'd have no ground to complain. The Whitmore dining room glowed under the golden chandelier. The family's finest china spread across the table like a warning. My instincts screamed that nothing good came when those plates were out. When everyone was seated, my father cleared his throat with ceremony. We've come up with the perfect idea. Combine Calandra's wedding with Morgan's anniversary. Twice the joy. One beautiful event. Morgan's smile was smug as she set a thick pink binder on the table and flipped through it like a portfolio. Blush color scheme, a 5-tier cake, live band, Vera Wang gown. It'll all be flawless. All eyes turned to me, expectant, waiting for the automatic yes I had been conditioned to give my whole life. My throat felt dry, but I forced the words out anyway. Let me think about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Forks hovered mid-air, smiles stiffened, and disbelief clouded the room. No one had expected hesitation. Then, before I could steady myself, my mother raised her phone high, beaming. "It's already official!" On the screen was her Facebook post, thrilled to announce a double celebration, Calandra's wedding and Morgan's anniversary. Details to come. Dozens of comments and congratulations lit up the screen. My stomach dropped. The decision wasn't mine. It never had been. They had already turned my wedding into Morgan's stage, and I had been written out before I even said a word. The house was silent when I slipped back in close to midnight. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the old grandfather clock filling the air. I'd come for a folder I'd left in my old room, but as I passed my mother's study, the glow of her iPad caught my eye. The screensaver hadn't locked. A single tap woke it, and suddenly, the truth I'd been dreading stared back at me. Emails lined the inbox, threads with florists, caterers, and venues. In each one, my mother had written the same line, casual and confident. "Calandra will cover everything once the contract is signed." My fingers trembled as I opened an attached Excel file. Rows of neat numbers filled the screen. Venue, $25,000. Catering, $18,000. Dress, $5,000. Entertainment, $10,000. At the bottom, highlighted in a garish shade of pink, was a single note, Calandra's responsibility. The words blurred as my stomach dropped. I clicked to the Orders tab, and there it was, a Vera Wang invoice for $5,000, charged directly to my credit card. My chest tightened as though the air had been sucked from the room. It wasn't just about money. It was the confirmation that my entire life, my choices, even my wedding, were nothing more than an account for them to drain. And then, as if the knife weren't already deep enough, I found one more. An email sent from an address labeled Wedding Coordinator to Robert. My father had written it himself. The words scrolled across the screen like poison. "Calandra wants a simple ceremony, nothing extravagant. She doesn't expect family contributions." They weren't only lying to me, they were rewriting my story, even to the man I was about to marry. The Whitmore living room looked warm and familiar, but the conversation that followed was anything but. My mother sat beside me on the couch, her hand trembling dramatically over mine. "Your grandfather isn't well, sweetheart. Please don't make this harder on him with all this conflict." My father leaned forward, his tone measured, almost paternal. "If you'll just cooperate, we'll help with the down payment on a condo. You and Robert deserve a place to start your life." Morgan sniffled, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her voice breaking just enough to sound rehearsed. "How could you be so heartless? This is my 10-year anniversary. Everyone in the family has been looking forward to it. Don't ruin it for us." Their words pressed against me from all sides. Duty, guilt, temptation. My head pulsed. My chest felt like it might cave in. Logic screamed that this was manipulation, but my heart, conditioned for years, wavered. A few days later, at the boutique, Morgan sealed their performance with one final act. She lifted a glass of red wine, smiled too sweetly, then stumbled just enough to send it spilling across the front of my gown. The ivory fabric bloomed into scarlet. Gasps filled the room. Morgan covered her mouth in feigned horror. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy! Thank goodness it wasn't paid for yet." Before I could react, my mother's hand pressed firmly on my arm. "Don't worry, dear. Clearly, that wasn't the right dress. We'll find one that better complements your sister's anniversary colors." I stood frozen, staring at the ruined fabric, my fists curling at my sides. It wasn't just a dress anymore. It was their declaration, that even my wedding day was theirs to rewrite, theirs to claim. And Morgan was more than willing to stand in the center of it, while I was expected, once again, to fade into the background. Robert's office overlooked downtown Charleston, the evening sun bouncing off glass towers and spilling across the desk where I had spread every incriminating email and invoice. My pulse raced, but Robert's voice was steady. "If you want to beat them, You need the law on your side, not just emotions. The words cut through my panic. For years I'd let guilt and loyalty control me, but now the evidence was all here, proof that my family was building a palace of lies on my back. I swallowed hard and nodded. From this moment on, every contract needs both our signatures. If not, it's invalid. When we met my parents at the venue the next day, chandeliers glittered overhead, and the manager handed us the paperwork with a smile. My father's pen hovered, ready to sign for me as always. I stopped him cold. If Robert and I don't both sign, this isn't happening. The room froze. My father forced a chuckle. My daughter, always so cautious. I didn't flinch. I wired $6,000 for the deposit and had the venue manager confirm by email that it was my sole contribution. My mother's smile wavered, but I felt something new rising inside me. Control. For the first time, I wasn't the obedient lamb. That night, Jessica called, her voice sharp with urgency. She had dug deeper into the vendor logs. Cal, your sister placed additional orders, live jazz band, fireworks, luxury add-ons, and every invoice tied to your name. It wasn't $63,000 anymore. They were trying to bury me alive in debt. Dinner at my parents' house was suffocating, the smell of roasted chicken clinging to the heavy air, wine glasses lined like props in a stage play. I barely set down my fork before my mother clutched her chest, gasping. You're stressing me, sweetheart. My heart can't take this. My father's voice followed, firm, a gavel striking. If you insist on defiance, don't expect a penny of inheritance. The Whitmore name will cut you off. Morgan smirked over her phone, tapping out a message that lit up mine seconds later. White doesn't suit you anyway. Let me wear it instead. I kept my face calm. But beneath the table, my fists curled so tight my nails bit into my palms. It felt like theater, each of them cast in their usual roles. Mother, the fragile martyr. Father, the stern patriarch. Morgan, the spoiled ingenue. And me, the scapegoat, the one meant to give in. Not this time. My phone buzzed again. A stranger on Facebook had tagged me in a post. I opened it and felt the ground tilt. A screenshot of my mother's announcement, complete with a full guest list, over 200 names. The entire Charleston community now believed in a wedding I had never agreed to. Before I could recover, Robert called. His voice was tight. The resort just confirmed, your parents ordered a champagne tower, a 5-tier cake, all under your name. They told management you'd be footing the entire bill. The trap wasn't private anymore. It was public, sprawling, impossible to untangle quietly. My family hadn't just crossed the line. They'd set it on fire. And for the first time, I realized the stage they'd built for me could just as easily become their downfall. The ballroom at Myrtle Beach Resort was dressed like a dream spun from crystal and excess. Chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors. A jazz band, brassy and bright, fought to be heard over the buzz of 200 conversations. A champagne tower shimmered at the center, each glass catching the glow like a promise of opulence. Men in tuxedos shifted impatiently. Women adjusted their gowns, and everywhere eyes flicked toward the doors that should have opened for me. My mother pressed her lips into a smile so brittle it looked ready to crack. My father dabbed sweat from his temple, murmuring reassurances that fooled no one. Morgan paced in her silver gown, heels clicking sharp against the tile, her irritation practically vibrating off her. "She's late!" one woman whispered, too loudly to be discreet. "Calandra always was careless," another man said with a sigh. Morgan spun on them, her face hot with anger. "She's ruining this. She's always ruined everything. I knew she'd do this." Her voice cracked, but not with grief, only rage. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. The spectacle was beginning to sag under its own weight, though no one dared say it aloud. Meanwhile, far from the chandeliers and champagne, I stood in a tiny wooden chapel by a lake in Asheville. The air smelled of wildflowers and pine, a breeze from the water lifting the edge of my simple sundress. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, scattering color across Robert's navy suit as he smiled at me. Behind us, only 30 faces looked on, friends who had carried me through dark years, Robert's family, who had welcomed me without conditions, and Jessica, who winked at me like she knew every secret running beneath this quiet ceremony. I pulled out my phone one last time and typed into the family group chat. "Running late, still in makeup. Everyone keep going without me." The message flew off like bait, and I silenced my phone. Then Robert's hands closed around mine. We spoke vows not crafted for show, but carved out of the marrow of survival and trust. His voice shook when he promised to stand beside me, no matter who tried to pull me down. Mine steadied when I swore never again to give away pieces of myself to people who saw me only as a resource. The chapel was hushed, the lake beyond it still, as if nature itself leaned closer to listen. Back at Myrtle Beach, whispers had swelled into restless chatter. Morgan's cheeks flushed red as she stormed toward my parents. "She's humiliating us. She's humiliating me. Why didn't you make her show up?" Before they could answer, the resort manager appeared at the edge of the ballroom, holding a clipboard and wearing a smile polished by years of dealing with difficult clients. He cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, congratulations. Now, as we're approaching the scheduled ceremony time, I'll need the remaining balance, $63,000. Gasps rippled through the room. My father blinked rapidly. There must be some mistake, my daughter. But the manager tapped the contract with his pen. "These are your signatures. You are the responsible parties. The deposit of $6,000 was already applied, but the outstanding balance remains." My mother's face drained of color, mascara smudging at the corners of her eyes. Morgan let out a sharp, guttural sound. "No, she's supposed to pay. She always pays. That's her role. She can't just—" But the paper in the manager's hand told a different story. My parents' names stood out in black ink, clear and undeniable. The murmurs of the guests turned into pointed stares. Morgan's tirade faltered as she realized the audience wasn't sympathetic. They were entertained, scandalized, and silently judging. At that same moment, the chapel filled with applause as Robert kissed me. My heart soared, not with spectacle, but with the clean, quiet relief of finally choosing myself. 2 weddings, 2 worlds. One built on lies and manipulation, crumbling in public under the weight of its own greed. The other built on truth, blooming quietly by a lake, where the only currency was love freely given. Morning light slanted through the blinds of our Asheville apartment when the pounding started. I opened the door to find my parents and Morgan, their faces tight and swollen from a sleepless night. They stormed inside without waiting, their voices already raised. My father slammed his palm onto the dining table so hard the frame on the wall rattled. "You will not disgrace this family like this. You will take responsibility for that bill." Morgan's shriek cut through his words. "You abandoned me in the middle of my anniversary. Do you know how humiliated I was?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened my laptop, clicked play, and let the room fill with Morgan's own laughter. "She'll pay for everything. That's what sisters are for." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. I slid a stack of papers across the table, printed emails in my mother's hand. "Calandra's responsibility." Then I pointed to the contract. "Whose names are these? Not mine. I paid $6,000, and here's the transfer receipt. That was my only obligation." For the first time, my voice didn't shake. I stood straight, every word steady, every nerve lit with freedom. From the doorway, Thomas finally spoke, his tone low but devastating. "Is it true, Morgan? You took her scholarship money? And now her wedding?" Morgan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face blanched, stripped of every performance. She wasn't only exposed to me anymore. Her own marriage was cracking under the truth. Autumn light warmed our little mountain home as I set yellow chrysanthemums on the table. Life with Robert was calm now, and I spent my days guiding young women through battles I once knew too well. A knock came. Morgan stood smaller than I remembered, her voice fragile. Thomas threatened to leave if I didn't get therapy. I see it now. I made you my sacrifice. I'm sorry. I held her gaze. You'll always be my sister, but I'm not your shadow anymore. On the wall, the framed $6,000 receipt glowed in the sun. Best investment in my freedom. I smiled, light as air. Happiness had never been theirs to give. It was mine the moment I chose freedom.